Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. She left her phone on the kitchen counter, wide open, just sitting there, flashing with a new message from a name I didn't recognize. Greg clinking glasses. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was trying to clean up after dinner. But the preview said, "Hope your husband bought that client dinner story again," face with tears of joy. My hands were wet. The dish towel was over my shoulder. My heart. It was in the trash with the empty takeout box I'd just tossed. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't need to. The silence in the house had already told me everything. I just hadn't wanted to listen. But that night, I heard it. She walked into the room 2 minutes later in heels she hadn't worn in 5 years, spritzed perfume by the front door, and said she might be late. "Don't wait up," she added, with a smile that didn't belong to me anymore. The moment the door shut behind her, I didn't chase. I didn't beg. I walked to the closet, grabbed the small lockbox she didn't know I still had, and took out the original front door key, the master one from when we moved in. 15 minutes later, the locksmith pulled into the driveway. While she laughed over wine with Greg, probably on my dime, I stood in my hallway, holding a handful of cold, old keys, and locking her out of my life. She wouldn't know anything was different, not yet. But when her phone buzzed again on the kitchen counter, I finally read it. "Wish you were spending the night," winking face. I closed the message. I turned off the lights. And I waited. Because when she called me later, confused, angry, desperate, that's when I made my move. The call came in at 9:43 p.m. Her name lit up my screen like a warning flare, but I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, just to let the panic set in on her end. Then I answered, keeping my voice steady, almost bored. "Hey," I said. There was a beat of silence. Then her voice, sharp and incredulous. "Dawson, why won't the key work? Did something happen to the lock?" I leaned back on the couch, staring at the dark TV screen, watching my own reflection flicker back at me. I didn't respond right away. Let her stew in it a second longer. I could hear traffic behind her, maybe even the scuffle of someone else's shoes. Greg, maybe? I pictured him standing next to her, eyebrows raised, waiting to see how she'd spin it. "I changed the locks," I said quietly. There was no rage, no theatrics. I didn't shout, just stated it like I might say, "I took out the trash." "You what?" I repeated myself, slower this time. "You changed the locks? Without telling me?" "I figured you'd be too busy to notice." Now came the part one didn't expect. The silence. Not defensive silence, but flat, almost controlled. "This is crazy," she muttered. "Are you seriously doing this? Over dinner with a client?" My chest tightened. Even now, she wouldn't admit it. "Oh, is that what Greg is?" I asked. "A client with a wine emoji next to his name?" I could hear her footsteps pacing now, maybe walking away from him, maybe trying to hide the conversation. "I don't know what you think you saw." "No, Leslie. You know exactly what I saw." She inhaled sharply. For a second, I thought she might finally say something honest. But instead, she lowered her voice into that careful, manipulative register I'd grown far too familiar with. "Listen, let's not do this over the phone. Just open the door. We'll talk, okay? Please?" And for the briefest second, I almost did. Even after everything, some pathetic part of me wanted to believe there was something worth salvaging behind that door. But then I looked over at her phone still sitting on the kitchen counter, lighting up again. New message. From Greg. This one just said, "Tell him you left something inside. I'll wait." I ended the call. Want to know what happens when she returns the next morning? The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of some fog where her voice kept repeating, "Just open the door. We'll talk." But I didn't. And I wouldn't. Not after what I saw. Not after the second message from Greg, where he told her to lie again. "Tell him you left your laptop," he wrote. "Say you need it for work." At 7:08 a.m., there was a knock. Not loud. Not desperate. Just ordinary. Like she was back from a jog or forgot her smoothie in the fridge. That's what hit me the hardest. The casualness of it. I stood behind the door in my robe, coffee in hand, not making a sound. I wanted to hear how long she'd wait. Turns out, not long. She knocked again, then pulled out her phone and called me. I watched the screen light up. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Hey, I'm outside. I think we both overreacted last night. Let me in. Let's talk like adults." Adults. She used that word a lot when she wanted me to ignore her lies. I set the phone down and walked to the window, carefully pulling the curtain. She looked just like she always did. Hair neat, sunglasses on, phone in one hand, iced coffee in the other. She wasn't rattled. She was prepared. Then she did something that made my skin crawl. She smiled. She pulled out her spare key, one I thought I'd collected months ago, and tried it. When it didn't work, her jaw clenched. Not in confusion, but recognition. Like she'd known this day was coming. She stood there for a moment, checked her reflection in the window, then typed something quickly on her phone. Seconds later, my phone buzzed again. A message. If you want to play games, fine. But you still owe me a conversation. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the guest room and opened the drawer where I'd hidden everything. The napkins, the receipts, the photo I snapped when she left her texts open last month. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was documented. She wasn't ready for that. And neither was Greg. I didn't open the door that morning. I watched her leave, calmly, heels clicking down the driveway like she was heading into a meeting. She didn't slam anything. Didn't scream. That was the most unsettling part. She wasn't panicking, because she still believed she could spin this, manipulate it, maybe even flip it back on me. That's what made her dangerous. Not the affair, not the lies, but the certainty that she could lie her way through anything. I spent the rest of that day in a fog. I looked through the evidence again, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I wanted to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I didn't imagine the shift in her. I used to know how she'd react to everything. What joke would make her laugh? What song would make her cry? But now, I couldn't even predict what lie she'd choose next. At 6:13 p.m., she tried again. This time she didn't knock. She texted me instead, said she was going to the gym, that she hoped we could reset after we cooled off. I nearly dropped my phone. Reset? I had changed the locks while she was with another man, and her response was to treat it like a lover's spat? So I replied, for the first time since the night before. Who is Greg? She didn't respond right away. I watched those 3 little dots pulse on the screen like a heartbeat trying to come back to life. Then the message popped up. Greg is a coworker. We had dinner to discuss his transition to the marketing team. It was a working meal. I didn't want to involve you because I knew how you get about things like this. How I get. Like I was the unhinged one. The paranoid one. She'd flipped it again, with surgical precision. She turned the whole thing into my flaw. That was the moment I realized this wasn't the woman I married. She might have had the same smile, the same perfume, the same voice I once fell asleep next to. But the woman on the other side of my door wasn't my wife. She was someone I didn't recognize anymore. And I couldn't let her back in. Not until she saw what I'd prepared for her. Not until I showed her the folder. Not until she knew what came next. The trap is set, and Leslie has no idea what she's walking into. That night, I sat in the same chair where I used to wait for her to come home. I remembered how I'd glance at the clock every 10 minutes, trying not to seem needy, convincing myself that traffic or overtime explained everything. I thought love meant giving the benefit of the doubt. Turns out, it just made me blind longer than I should have been. The folder sat on the coffee table like a loaded weapon. I had printed everything, screenshots, timestamps, even the restaurant bill she left crumpled in her coat pocket with Greg's signature and a stupid little heart next to it. I didn't know if I was going to show it to her or just keep it for myself. Proof. Closure. Evidence that I wasn't the unstable one. At 10:41 p.m., she texted again. I'm stopping by in the morning. We need to fix this before it gets worse. Worse? I stared at those words like they were written in fire. There was no we anymore. She just hadn't realized it yet. But I had. So I didn't reply. Instead, I set an alarm for 6:30, dressed in jeans and a black hoodie like I was preparing for war, and placed the folder in the center of the dining table. Not hidden, not dramatic. Just there, waiting, like a mirror she'd be forced to look into. At 8:02 a.m., I heard the knock. This time, it was different. Not casual. Not confident. 3 knocks. Then a pause. Then one more. I didn't open the door. I just let her stand there. Let her feel, for once, what it was like to be on the outside of her own life. Then, through the door, her voice cracked. Dawson, please. Not angry. Not fake sweet. Just tired. Worn out. Like maybe she was starting to understand. I know you're in there, she said. I saw your car. I'm not here to argue. I'm just here to talk. And maybe that would have worked if not for what she did next. She tried the lock again. And when it didn't budge, she pulled out a second key. Not the spare, a new one. She'd made a copy. Behind my back. Even after I changed the locks. Even after the lies. She was still trying to find a way in without being invited. That's when I knew the folder wouldn't be enough. I had to show her something else. Something she couldn't argue with. Something recorded. She didn't see it at first. The moment I finally opened the door, she stormed in like she still owned the place, like her keycard still worked and her name was still on the lease of my trust. She walked straight past me, dropped her designer bag onto the kitchen counter, and exhaled like I was the one who owed her an explanation. "Thank you," she said, brushing her hair back. "Can we just sit down and stop acting like teenagers?" I didn't speak. I watched her scan the room, waiting for me to engage, to argue, but I didn't. That threw her off. Then she saw the folder on the table. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I walked to the living room, picked up the Bluetooth speaker I'd already paired to my phone, and turned the volume up. Her confusion was immediate, almost rehearsed. "Dawson, what are you doing?" I hit play. The room filled with sound. Her voice, unmistakably hers. Laughing, flirtatious, in a restaurant. Greg's voice followed. Clear, calm, confident. "Your husband really thinks you're still doing late-night product meetings? He thinks I'm in a marketing rebrand session. Can you believe that? He asked if I wanted to watch a documentary tonight." She froze. "He's probably sitting at home microwaving leftover meatloaf while I'm tasting $300 wine with you." And then they both laughed. That laughter echoed like a slow crack through the walls. I didn't look at her while it played. I watched the coffee drip from the machine behind her. I watched the steam rise. I watched her carefully constructed mask collapse in fractions, the denial fading first, then the fury, then the pathetic realization that she couldn't twist this one. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice small now. I finally looked at her. "Does it matter?" She blinked, tried to summon the courage to fight back, but it wasn't there anymore. "You recorded me?" I shook my head. "I didn't have to. You left your smartwatch synced to our old iPad. It auto-uploaded your calls, including FaceTime audio. I just downloaded it." She stared at me like I'd turned into someone else, and maybe I had. Because in that moment, I wasn't the doormat anymore. I was the one sitting on truth while she drowned in her own lies. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. After the audio ended, the room sat in this eerie kind of silence. Not angry, not tense, just empty. She stood completely still, like her body hadn't caught up with her mind yet. I thought maybe she'd scream, throw something, try to spin it. But instead, Leslie did something I'd never seen her do before. She cried. Not dramatic, mascara-running sobs like you'd see in movies. No, she just sat down slowly at the table, blinked a few times, and the tears came without her even trying to stop them. "Dawson," she said softly, "I never meant for it to get this far." That sentence made me laugh. Out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. As if this whole thing had just happened to her. Like infidelity was some sort of runaway train she accidentally climbed aboard and couldn't jump off. "You had a choice," I said flatly. "I know," she whispered, hands shaking now. "I know I did." She reached across the table as if touching my hand would undo the wreckage she'd created. I pulled mine back. "That's not going to work anymore." Her face collapsed. "Please, just listen. He doesn't matter." It wasn't serious. It was stupid. I felt invisible. "You don't even realize how distant you've been." And there it was, the pivot. Her signature move. From denial to guilt to blame, all in one monologue. I'd seen it before, in smaller forms. When she forgot our anniversary, when she hid credit card debt, when she stayed out all night and claimed she'd lost track of time. She could turn anything into my fault if I gave her a big enough pause. But this time, I didn't blink. "You didn't feel invisible," I said calmly. "You felt untouchable." She covered her face. "What do you want me to say?" I stood up, walked to the kitchen, grabbed a manila envelope from the drawer, dropped it in front of her. She looked at it like it was a grenade. "What is this?" My move. Inside was a printed timeline of every discrepancy in her story from the last 6 months. Dates, names, restaurant receipts, even screenshots from her shared cloud drive. One where she accidentally backed up a selfie she took in Greg's bathroom mirror. "I was going to give you a chance to explain," I said. "But you already answered everything. With that recording. With that backup. With that second key you thought I wouldn't notice." She sat back like she'd just swallowed fire. "You've been planning this." "No," I said. "I was hoping I'd never need to. But now I did." And the next step would be the one she never saw coming. She didn't say a word as she flipped through the envelope. I watched her lips tremble when she saw the screenshot from Greg's mirror. The one with her purse, her earrings, her reflection half-turned like she was in some romantic movie scene. Except the man behind the camera wasn't her husband. She closed the folder halfway through. Leslie stood up, slowly, carefully, as if standing too fast might shatter the fragile lie she'd wrapped herself in. "So that's it?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse, broken, but not confused. "Not this time." I nodded. "That's it. I made a mistake. You made a lifestyle." She looked at me like she wanted to fight, like she had a whole speech ready, maybe even a few well-rehearsed tears to sell it. But I think something in my face told her it wouldn't work anymore. I wasn't begging. I wasn't shaking. I was just done. And that scared her more than anything else I could have said. She picked up her bag, glanced around the house one last time, and walked toward the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't say goodbye. The door clicked shut, and just like that, the weight I'd carried for months was gone. That evening, I made dinner for myself. Nothing special, just pasta and garlic bread. I sat at the table with music playing softly in the background, and I ate in peace. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like freedom. And as strange as it sounds, I wasn't angry anymore. Not even sad. I had been loyal, patient, honest. I gave her every chance. And when it all fell apart, I stood up for myself without losing who I was. That's something I can live with. I don't know what her next chapter looks like, and honestly, it's not my story anymore. Mine starts now. If you've ever had a moment where you finally stood up for yourself, or if something in this story hit close to home, drop a comment and tell us what it was. We read every single one. And don't forget, subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more stories that prove sometimes the quietest people make the loudest exits.